Love is supposed to be simple, a connection, the bond, a shared experience. But for some, love is terrifying. Not because they don't want it, but because it threatens control, stability, and independence. Falling in love requires vulnerability, a surrender of certainty that most people are not prepared to give. Many fear love because it exposes them to risk. Emotional exposure, dependency, rejection, and heartbreak, these are consequences that some minds cannot tolerate. They have seen relationships fail. They have watched trust be broken. They have internalized pain so deeply that the idea of surrendering again is paralyzing. Love is a battlefield for the mind. Those who fear it understand its power to destabilize, to distract, to demand attention, and to challenge identity. They recognize that love can consume focus, warp priorities, and make the strongest feel powerless. In this video, we will explore why people fear falling in love, how the mind creates barriers to intimacy, and why understanding this fear is the first step toward mastering your emotional life. We'll uncover the psychological truths that make love both alluring and terrifying, and reveal how to approach it without losing yourself. Because love is not weakness. But for those who fear it, it feels like everything they cannot control. Fear of falling in love is rarely about love itself. It is about control. The human mind craves predictability, certainty, and security. Love, by its very nature, undermines all three. It introduces variables that cannot be fully controlled: emotions, timing, compatibility, and vulnerability. For the calculated mind, this unpredictability is terrifying. It is a territory where instinct clashes with reason, and where the risk of exposure feels too high. Many people fear love because it forces them to confront themselves. To truly fall in love, you must face your insecurities, your past wounds, and the parts of yourself you keep hidden. The mind resists exposure because vulnerability feels like weakness. The fear is not of the other person, but of the possibility that they will see the parts of you you wish to hide, your imperfections, your dependency, your need. For some, the thought of surrendering control over their emotional walls is paralyzing. Rejection is another deep-seated trigger. Falling in love carries the possibility of heartbreak, humiliation, or betrayal. Psychologically, humans are wired to avoid pain. The anticipation of emotional loss can be more terrifying than physical danger. Those who have experienced betrayal or abandonment are especially cautious. Their fear is a protective mechanism, a mental shield designed to prevent the possibility of being hurt again. Attachment itself can feel threatening. Love requires interdependence, which means your happiness becomes partially reliant on someone else. For people who prize independence, self-sufficiency, or control over their environment, this dependency feels risky. The idea that another person could influence your emotional state, priorities, or decisions triggers resistance and fear. There is also the fear of identity loss. Love can transform individuals, reshaping priorities, habits, and daily life. Those who fear it often cling to their routines, their autonomy, and their mental frameworks. Falling in love demands compromise and adaptation, which can feel like surrender. The mind perceives this as a loss of self, and humans instinctively resist what feels like erosion of identity. Finally, fear of love is often tied to projection and learned behavior. Observing failed relationships in family, friends, or culture teaches the mind to anticipate pain rather than pleasure. Stories of betrayal, neglect, or abandonment are internalized, forming mental roadblocks that trigger caution before connection. Fear becomes self-reinforcing. The more one avoids love, the more justified the mind feels in fearing it. In essence, love is feared because it is unpredictable, destabilizing, and exposes the deepest layers of the human psyche. It challenges control, provokes vulnerability, and introduces risk that the mind instinctively avoids. The fear is not irrational. It is rooted in survival instincts, past experiences, and the natural drive to protect the self from emotional harm. Yet, understanding the source of this fear is the first step toward mastering it. Recognizing the psychological mechanisms at play allows you to approach love with strategy, intention, and awareness, rather than letting instinctive fear dictate your actions. Look around, and you'll see it everywhere. People sabotaging their own chances at connection, retreating when intimacy appears, or keeping relationships shallow out of fear. This is the reality of the psychology of love. For many, the idea of falling in love is frightening because it forces them to confront uncertainty, the kind that most of the world avoids at all costs. The mind craves predictability, and love is inherently unpredictable. Timing, compatibility, emotions, and circumstances all shift in ways that cannot be controlled. Those who fear love feel the weight of this unpredictability before it even begins. Fear manifests in subtle ways. Some people avoid commitment by staying emotionally distant, creating barriers that prevent closeness. Others sabotage relationships at the first sign of vulnerability. Social interactions that could lead to deep connection are avoided or minimized. The mind constructs scenarios of rejection, heartbreak, and betrayal long before any real experience occurs. This constant anticipation of negative outcomes reinforces fear, making avoidance feel like a rational choice. Consider the workplace or social settings. People often observe others in relationships and notice patterns of conflict, disappointment, or unfulfilled expectations. These observations shape mental models of love as risky and destabilizing. Those who internalize these lessons unconsciously replicate them, creating self-fulfilling prophecies. Love becomes something to be feared, not explored. Fear of falling in love also affects mental and physical energy. Anxiety, overthinking, and hypervigilance consume attention that could otherwise be directed toward growth, connection, or creativity. People distracted by fear miss opportunities for joy, partnership, and personal evolution. They may appear guarded, aloof, or cold, yet beneath the surface is a mind calculating every potential risk before engagement. On a deeper level, fear of love is fear of change. To fall in love is to allow life to shift unpredictably. Priorities, routines, and habits may be disrupted. Emotional vulnerability opens a door to influence from another person. For those who prize autonomy and control, this is threatening. The fear is not of the other person but of the loss of certainty. Love challenges the structure of the mind that people spend a lifetime building. Even culturally, fear of love is reinforced. Stories of betrayal, heartbreak, or failed marriages are pervasive. Observing these patterns teaches the brain to anticipate failure. Emotional walls are erected as defenses. The fear becomes self-reinforcing. Avoidance feels safer, yet it also limits fulfillment and growth. Yet this reality contains a lesson. Fear is a signal, not a barrier. Understanding why the mind resists love allows conscious choice. Awareness transforms fear from a paralyzing force into a guide for intentional action. Recognizing the psychological mechanisms behind fear, vulnerability, unpredictability, attachment, and potential loss gives power over them. Ultimately, fear of falling in love is not weakness. It is a protective instinct, a response to risk and uncertainty. But those who confront it, who analyze it, and who approach love deliberately, transform fear into strategy. They can engage fully without being consumed, connect deeply without losing themselves, and navigate intimacy without surrendering control. The mind can be trained to embrace love as a deliberate choice rather than a threat, turning fear into mastery. To overcome the fear of falling in love, you must first reclaim control over your mind. Fear thrives when the mind feels powerless, uncertain, or reactive. Start by identifying the thoughts and assumptions that trigger anxiety around intimacy. Are you projecting past experiences onto potential relationships? Are you equating vulnerability with weakness? Awareness is the first step to dismantling these mental barriers. Next, build emotional resilience. Fear of love is often fear of pain. While heartbreak is possible, emotional mastery allows you to experience connection without losing yourself. Practice observing your feelings without reacting impulsively. Accept discomfort as part of growth, rather than a signal to withdraw. By managing your emotions, you reduce the influence of fear and increase your ability to engage with love deliberately. Set clear boundaries. One of the reasons people fear love is the perceived loss of autonomy. To counter this, define your limits and communicate them clearly. Boundaries do not make you cold, they make you strong. They allow you to enter relationships with confidence, knowing that your independence, values, and identity are protected. When you maintain control over your emotional space, fear diminishes because you are not surrendering yourself blindly. Practice deliberate vulnerability. Fear arises from uncertainty and risk, but connection requires exposure. Start small. Share thoughts, experiences, and feelings in a measured way. Observe the results. Notice that vulnerability does not automatically lead to pain. Gradually, your comfort zone expands, and fear loses its grip. By approaching intimacy strategically, you gain experience and confidence, turning fear into empowerment. Develop discernment. Not everyone is worthy of deep emotional investment, and not every connection should be pursued. Learn to read people, recognize patterns, and make calculated decisions about trust. Fear diminishes when it is paired with informed judgment. When you know you are engaging with someone who respects and values you, the risk becomes manageable rather than paralyzing. Finally, reframe love as strength, not surrender. Falling in love is not giving up power. It is choosing to engage with life fully. Love becomes a conscious decision, a strategic engagement of the mind and heart. By approaching it with awareness, discipline, and intention, you transform fear into control. The mind learns that love is not a threat but an opportunity for growth, connection, and fulfillment. Through awareness, emotional resilience, boundaries, deliberate vulnerability, discernment, and reframing, fear loses its authority. You no longer avoid connection, you approach it strategically. You are cautious but courageous. You are aware but open. Fear is no longer the master of your heart. It becomes a signal, a guide, and eventually a catalyst for emotional mastery. Those who master the psychology of love can engage fully without being consumed, connect deeply without losing themselves, and navigate intimacy without surrendering control. Fear is no longer a barrier, it becomes a tool. By approaching love strategically, you gain the power to experience it with clarity, confidence, and unshakable composure. Fear of falling in love is not a flaw, it is a signal. It shows where the mind guards itself, where past wounds linger, and where uncertainty threatens control. But fear does not have to dictate your actions. When approached with awareness, strategy, and discipline, it becomes a guide, not a barrier. Mastery of fear begins with self-mastery. Control your emotions, observe your reactions, and recognize the triggers that make love feel threatening. Build resilience so that discomfort no longer demands retreat. Set boundaries that protect your identity while allowing connection. Approach vulnerability deliberately, measuring exposure with discernment. Love becomes a conscious choice, not an uncontrolled risk. When you act with intention, fear transforms into power. You engage in relationships fully without being consumed, you connect deeply without losing yourself, and you navigate intimacy without surrendering control. The people you allow into your life respect your clarity, your strength, and your emotional intelligence. You are cautious but courageous, aware but open, disciplined yet present. Understand this: love does not diminish strength, it amplifies it. Fear is not weakness, it is a tool to sharpen awareness. Those who learn to balance caution with openness become emotionally untouchable. They experience love without compromise, without chaos, and without unnecessary risk. Embrace fear. Understand it. Master it. And in doing so, you gain the ability to love deliberately, courageously, and strategically. Because those who fear nothing in love are not reckless, they are untouchable. They are disciplined, they are strong, and they are free.